Hey everyone, I'm here today with Andrea Dahlman, who is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and she specializes in digestive health and IBS. She has been in practice for 9 years, and her friends call her the poop talker, which I love. Andrea helps clients identify the root causes of their digestive imbalances and helps them restore health by addressing the underlying causes. Her work focuses on the digestive process from the first fork full of food to the last flush of the toilet. That's awesome. I love that. It is her goal to return to them to a life they love, free of digestive challenges. You can find Andrea at andreadahlman.com, and that'll be in our notes, so you can click on that easily, or on social media as Redeeming Nutrition. She has a virtual practice and sees clients from all over the U.S. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm
Absolutely.
excited to join you today. Talk about poop. Let's do it.
I know. I'm like, that's always my favorite topic, pretty much, you know? That's what us nutritionists do. So I invited Andrea onto the podcast because, you know, some of you might know some of the work that I do as a functional health coach and using functional lab testing to really get clear on what is happening in your body. So, you know, root cause, like we were talking about. And this has really changed my practice in a lot of ways. And, you know, I do a lot to kind of talk about it to clients, but I realized I really want to have a podcast on it because a lot of people don't know about this testing. They don't know it exists. And if they have heard of it, they don't really know what it does and what the purposes are for. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the reason I specialize in digestive health is because the diet, while very, very important, how your body actually processes and digests that food is equally important. And sometimes we don't have a way to really know what's happening unless we run some functional testing and to really get a picture of what's going on from top to bottom.
Yeah, it's so true because, you know, the thing that I found for so long was your client can tell you these symptoms and it's really you're kind of guessing, right? Because symptoms can often mean multiple things. And until you see on a test, oh, okay, now we know you're having those symptoms because this underlying thing is happening, then we can get to the point much quicker, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I really do prefer test, don't guess for a lot of people, especially if you've been dealing with symptoms for a super long time and, you know, you've changed your diet and things aren't really starting to shift. So, you know, it can be super helpful to really dial it in.
Absolutely. Because I know it gets really frustrating for people when they feel like they've done all this work and they're not better. Yeah. So let's jump into talking about one of the tests that I use, and I know that you use too, the GI map, which is a stool analysis test for those that haven't, you know, heard of that before. So do you want to just kind of walk us through the basics of what it is?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different stool tests on the market, and I use the GI map as well. But the GI map is great because of the way that they test the stool. There's several different ways or methodologies, but they do an actual DNA sequencing and looking for the DNA of that specific bacteria. And that's helpful because they're not necessarily going to culture it. You can culture bacteria, or you can use a microscopy where you would look at it under a microscope to see. And oftentimes those tend to not yield, those other methods don't yield the best results because depending on where they took the poo sample from, it may not have that particular particle in it. So when you're looking for the DNA is there if the DNA is going to be there. So that's kind of why the GI map is, in my opinion, a more superior test. There are a couple other ones that use the same type of technology, but the way that they quantify it is just slightly different. And for my clinical experience, the GI map gives me the best information to help clients.
Absolutely. So what are a few of the markers that, you know, you see on the GI map that people might have heard of or might understand?
Yeah, so it has different categories, and as you and it's like a 4-page report that we get back. And the first page is all the pathogens. So we see bacterial pathogens, parasitic pathogens, and viral pathogens. And those pathogens could be something like E. coli. So if you were suspicious of you know, I went on a vacation and I came back and I never really wasn't feeling good. Well, we could actually see on that first page whether or not, E.
I
coli was
got
still
some.
up
Yeah.
there. Yeah. The thing about the pathogens page is sometimes people will test positive for it, or we'll see those markers elevated, and it's really symptomatic on whether we would look at it from a place where we would want to have to rebalance the body around it. Some people will have that DNA show up, and it doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to be addressed if they're asymptomatic. So you kind of get a sense of it based on the person's presentation. On the second page, you see H. pylori. And H. pylori is a bacteria that we all carry, but when it overgrows can cause some really symptomatic problems. H. pylori is notorious for causing stomach ulcer and upper GI pain. Also a real driver behind low stomach acid. So we get to see that particular marker. And then we get to see what I kind of divide the next sections into kind of a garden. So we get to see how many flowers you have, how many weeds you have, and how many pests you have. And so we get a sense of your normal bacterial flora, which is great because that allows for us to see like how healthy is your healthy population. Like, do you have appropriate amount of roses? Is your geraniums healthy? Like all the things that we want in population, are they there and present? So we get to look at that on the GI map. The opportunistic bacteria, those I call the weeds. The weeds aren't necessarily bad if they're in the right population and haven't overgrown. Like one dandelion in your lawn isn't going to be like, oh my gosh, we need to rip out our lawn. But if there's like a dandelion field growing in your lawn, then you probably are going to need to get in there and do some weeding, kind of get things rebalanced, change maybe the pH of your lawn so that, you get more flowers growing and less weeds growing. But we also get a sense of potential autoimmune triggers. And these give us a picture, and they're not to say like if this person has a autoimmune, this particular bacteria is high, that person has this particular autoimmune. It's these strains that have been studied in conjunction with autoimmune conditions. And so if we see overpopulation of those, and somebody's like has rheumatoid arthritis, for example, and then their Klebsiella, which is a autoimmune bacteria, is higher, we can say, okay, so Klebsiella is overgrowing here, and we probably need to, help you rebalance that bacteria back. So we get a sense of that. Fungus and yeast, we get to look at that, which is awesome. I will say, kind of as a caveat, that fungal we can get a sense of it if it is really overgrown, but sometimes it is hard for the GI map to pick it up. So I actually use a secondary test if I'm suspicious based on symptoms for the yeast and fungus. But
yeah, it's definitely missed it in a couple of my clients for sure.
Yeah,
I will say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I use actually an organic acids test too if I'm suspicious more in that candida, yeasty, mold range. I choose a different set of tests for that. But we can see that, and I do see it come up, especially in people who maybe have SIBO, because SIBO and Candida tend to be best friends for some reason. I don't know. I see those partner up a lot. Viruses, we get to see virus, so cytomegalovirus and Epstein-Barr. We get a sense of if there's a lingering, has there been an infection and now it's gone and there's still the DNA showing up, or is there an active situation going on. On the last page, or the last section of the last page is the pests. So those are the parasites, which are the protozoas and the worms. And I like to think of them as like, that's the aphid or the whatever in your flower garden. It's like, no, you do not want those. Most of them it's rare for those to really show up, the parasites and the worms, but it does happen. I have had clients with both, like the blastocystis hominis that's a pretty common one that will show up if that is going to show up, and worms. I've had a couple clients with worms. They're like, how did I get worms?
You're like, you're alive in the world. It happens, I mean, It's so funny. We think it only happens in other countries, but that's not
right.
reality.
But what we forget is that a lot of our food comes from other countries. And so,
Yep. And we travel and, I mean, even if somebody in our families travel, there's so many ways that people don't realize it can happen.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Farmers markets are another place that people will pick those things up.
Yeah.
Wash your fruits and veggies, friends.
Yeah. Good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah. The last section, which is pretty interesting, I always I look at the bacteria, but I flip right to the bottom first, and then I go back up to the top. But the last little section is our intestinal health, and we get to see markers that will tell us, is our body digesting the fats in our diet? Is our body digesting the carbohydrates in our diet? We also see some markers. One for you that would be pretty important is an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which tells us how well the body is clearing estrogens and other hormones, but mostly estrogens from the body. We can see if there's blood in the stool. We would get a marker that would let us know about that. Then we also see like an immune response. So how the body's immune system is doing. Is it like the army is, and I like to use analogies when I educate my clients so that they have word pictures in their mind. So
Yeah.
we all have this immune system army. And if your army number is good, then it means like, okay, you have enough troops to handle what's happening in the body, or there's not anything that it needs to address. But if the number is really low, that can indicate, you've had a battle and your soldiers are down. Or really high, we've called in we've called foreign countries, and we're trying to get all of the people on board to fight whatever it is going on. So we get a sense of that in this test. There's a marker called the Anti-Gliadin Marker, and this is a protein that's associated with gluten. And that will give us an indication on how well your body is handling that. Sometimes people will have given up gluten and the number will still be really high, and they'll be like, I don't even eat gluten. What's the deal?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I get it.
And then we have to talk about cross-reactivity of other grains, because that will give us oh, wow. Because a lot of people who go gluten-free, what do? They start eating corn.
Yep, exactly.
Right?
They're like, bring in that corn.
Yeah, the corn chips, the corn tortilla. And then on that last part of the page is a number called an inflammation marker called calprotectin, and that will give us a sense of how inflamed the GI tract is. And that's usually, if that number is high, there's a more serious condition going on. Oftentimes, if I see it come in the red zone, I will refer out to make sure they get a colonoscopy, especially if I see it with occult blood. Like that's you got to go get checked. Yeah. We want to make sure that there's nothing more serious going on.
Yeah. So I have a question, because I've been thinking about this a lot, just with what's happening right now in the world with COVID. In terms of the immune marker, how often have you actually seen that come back, in a good place or a good range?
What's surprising is I see it more often. That it does look pretty good, but oftentimes I see it very low. Like they have already fought something,
right?
And now their immune system needs support to get back
up,
get those soldiers back up and get them back in play.
Because that's what I feel like I see more often, is that kind of lower number, like they're a little pooped. The army's a little pooped, right?
Yeah.
Not to bring up poop again, but it's all poop, right?
That's what it is.
And I've had a couple that are in that higher range, but I just find it interesting with kind of this discussion of, we say healthy people, like going back out into the world right now. And I think a lot of people don't understand how depressed so many people's immune systems are, because we've already been battling a lot of these things unknowingly, right, inside of our system for a while. And we may know it if we kind of connect to some of the symptoms, but a lot of times we haven't. And so I don't think it's that easy to say, oh, if you're healthy, you can go back into the world and you're going to be okay. And it's like, well, you may or may not actually have that immune function up in the way that you would like, until you kind of see this and do some work around it.
For sure. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with how, like, for a lot of clients, their fiber content of their diet tends to be on the lower side. And we really, in order for that bacteria profile to be affected and changed, it needs fiber. It needs a prebiotic, which feeds those short chain fatty acids. So there's a very symbiotic thing that happens with our diet and the bacteria that's present there. And that's how that immune system can get stronger, is by really working on And depending on what's present, because
Mhm.
putting fiber in for someone who has SIBO would be like a,
Is not right. And
yeah,
this
you wouldn't
is,
want to do
yeah,
that.
that would be ugly.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's such a good point and shows how individual we are, right? Depending on what
Yeah.
is going in our garden. And I love that analogy. It's one of my favorite because the idea isn't to just go in there and blow everything up, right? It's to see
Right.
what your garden is looking like and what you need
Right.
to tweak and support and those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things, what you want to grow, what you want to not be there as much. It doesn't mean you're eradicating everything. It's
Right.
just getting things back
Right.
into a nice, working condition.
Right.
So,
Well, and just to kind of piggyback on that, a lot of people who have been sick, who have taken antibiotics,
mhm,
like over courses of time, your flower garden is definitely compromised. And if you
absolutely,
have open spaces in your garden,
someone's
that's
gonna
the
feel it.
that's right. That's right. It's just
Yep.
more potential for the opportunistics, like, oh, look,
Yeah.
good open space over there. I'll just fill that right in.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I was so scared to do the GI map. And I knew, this is when I was training in the program that both of us did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scared to do it because I had gone through these surgeries where I ended up, I got burned in 3 places in my intestines during a fibroid removal
Oh,
unknowingly.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I ended
wow.
up with sepsis.
Oh, gosh.
And I
Yeah.
ended up losing half my colon. I had an ostomy bag for 6.5 months, and then I was reversed. So I was put back together again. But I was on 2 weeks of IV antibiotics, followed by 10 days of oral after that, after that set of surgeries. And then the reversal surgery, there was another 10 days of oral antibiotics. And I was like, oh, I'm scared, because
Right.
I mean, the whole time I didn't have use of my colon. It was a weird thing because I was like, do I take probiotics or not? Like, could I create a SIBO issue since it can only get to my small intestine? And I was
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it's this weird thing nobody knows the answer to because it's just not studied. And then
Right.
I waited like probably about 2 months after my reversal surgery to kind of start to try and re-inoculate. But needless to say, I was like, oh God, the GI map is going to be, this was like 6 months later. I was like, it's going to be horrible. And it wasn't quite as bad as I thought, but it definitely, I mean, that good bacteria, that's what I love about that test. It really shows you
Mm-hmm.
how your beneficial
Mm-hmm.
bacteria is doing. And obviously, several strains were low,
Right. Sure.
and that's going to
Well,
take
and
some time.
yeah. And the beauty of the body is that it's dynamic and always
Absolutely.
changing. And just because you're in the situation, whatever your health situation is today, it does not mean that that's a life sentence. Like, you
Yes.
have power to biohack your own body's chemistry and create a different story for yourself.
Yes, and
It
I'm
just
glad you
takes
made that
time.
point. It does take time. You have to be patient, but I do
Mm-hmm.
think, I've seen this a lot out there, and it used to scare me because who hasn't had antibiotics in their lifetime?
Sure. Yeah,
Almost
absolutely.
everyone has. And it used to scare me because people would say, oh, once you have had antibiotics, it changes the microbiome forever and it'll never be as good. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I believe that we have the ability to completely shift and change, depending
Absolutely.
on all of these factors, depending on what we eat, depending on the lives that we lead, the things that we really work on to level things out. And our bodies are amazing, amazing,
Yeah.
systems, and we
Yeah.
gotta give them props. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I survived what I did, and I'm here, and
Yeah.
um,
That's awesome.
yeah, relatively healthy place. So I
Yeah.
do have a little funny story though, and I have no idea if it's really true or not. But so H. pylori showed up on my test, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh God, I actually wonder if I've had H. pylori for a long time. I was asymptomatic except for low HCl. I'd been
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
taking digestive enzymes and HCl for a while, just kind of figuring, I mean, definitely everything I went through, but even age stuff before that. But my cat, within the past year, started having just kind of throwing up a lot. And I was like, what is happening? What is going on? And she took him to the vet, tried all these things. And then someone told me just in the past couple of months that I should try giving him Pepsid AC because it's an acid reflux issue, right, with cats. And I was like, okay, let me do a little digging here. So I start looking online and I didn't find much, but there was one holistic vet that said it's an H. pylori overgrowth situation in cats, just the same as with humans, that's causing this acid reflux. For them, they're throwing up, And so I actually ended up ordering a supplement for him that they recommended. It's Apex Energetic supplement that I would have given a human,
Right.
And I'm giving him that too. I was like, we're sharing our H. pylori love. But I mean, it is legit that when you live with animals, things can get
Yeah.
passed along too,
Right. Well, we all have a very unique microbiome, like unique as like our fingerprint. And microbiome meaning the bacteria that our body is populated with.
Mm-hmm.
But we share anybody that we live with. We share a very similar microbiome dynamic, and that includes our pets. They influence that microbiome.
Yep.
And I've heard, and I can't give you like this study, but I've heard that if you have pets that come in and out of your home, your microbiome is actually stronger as a result of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine's an indoor cat, so we're just like sharing all the things. I was like, of course he does. I'm feeding him digestive enzymes and mastica,
so awesome.
Right. It's hilarious. Okay, so I think that was a great overview of the GI map. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the MRT food sensitivities test.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that.
So there are a lot of different ways to measure food sensitivity, and most people are familiar, and I'll get to the MRT, but let's talk about what's not the MRT. Most people are most familiar with IgG and IgA testing, which is an antibody type testing. And that actually only tests one particular pathway that the proteins are tagged by your immune system. And so as a result, if you're only testing that one pathway, you're only going to see the results of that one pathway. Versus the MRT, which is a little bit different. They actually do a method where they are looking for the end products, which MRT stands for mediated release test. And so we're looking at the end result of those end products when we test your blood against specific food products, how your white blood cells respond to that and what end product that it puts out. And that could be, and an end product would, for most people that's most familiar, would be like a histamine. So if you eat something and you get itchy, that's a histamine response. But we aren't always aware of all the other cellular ways that our body has a end product result. All we experience are the symptoms that go along with that. So really, this is a measurement of that particular mechanism, and it measures all the pathways rather than just the one IgG, IgA pathway.
Nice. Yeah.
So that's how it's a little bit different than the other testing. But the one thing I do love about the MRT specifically, and oftentimes we will run them in conjunction with the GI map, like to see what is this person sensitive to and how is it affecting their digestive system. But the thing about the MRT, they do 170 foods and chemicals. So you don't just get to see, am I allergic to, or not allergic, but sensitive to blueberries. And let's go back to that just for a second. What's the difference between a food sensitivity, a food allergy, and a food intolerance? I think that's an important distinction to understand. So food allergy, which is what most people associate with, like if you have a peanut allergy or a shellfish allergy, it's an immediate response that the body is having. The immune system says this is not okay for this body, and it will produce hives or swelling, like it's immediate. And so that's a true food allergy. A food intolerance would be something where your body isn't making the right enzymes to break down that particular food product. And an example of that for most people would be like lactose. I'm lactose intolerant, right? So I have ice cream and it messes me up. But a food sensitivity, which is, it's a little bit harder to get to the bottom of it, that is more of a delayed response. And it can happen immediately, usually not in the form of swelling or rashes, but maybe like a headache or stomach upset, or it can happen up to 3 days later. So it's really hard to determine or get even work through like what are the foods that we're truly sensitive to. And our some people will say, are food sensitivities forever? Some people, yes. Some people, no. Some people, it's a matter of if there's a lot of food sensitivities, it really speaks to intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And once you deal with kind of the gut side of things, a lot of those foods can be put back in a safe way.
And that's what I love. I mean, there's so many things about this test that yeah, I think are helpful than just kind of sort of the traditional allergy testing. But I like to let clients know that, more than likely the things that show up on there aren't forever, and that we have kind of this period of time to remove them, to let your gut heal, right? To let that lining heal. And then it just doesn't feel like this death sentence in the way that I think a lot of times when you go find out you're allergic to something, it's like, okay, I have to take that out for the rest of my life. Though there are definitely things that show up, that will need to maybe be gone for a while, if not for the long term.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and how I even got into the work that I'm doing is because my husband had some severe sinus and migraine issues, and we've done a lot of work for his health, and is pretty good. But if he gets contaminated with gluten, it's like instant migraine for him. Triggers migraine. So it's just like it's out of his diet.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, honestly, gluten is one of those that for a lot of people, it's just not great.
Take it out anyway.
It's always, I think the hardest thing to talk about, that's one of the hardest things to talk to clients about, other than it, in certain situations when they need to remove coffee. The coffee one is absolutely the hardest.
Girl, I'm from Seattle. Preach.
People are like, nope. Can't do it. Sorry.
We walk around with an IV drip bag.
Seriously,
full of
you're like, I got my Starbucks bag right here. Thank you. Oh man, yeah. So, but the gluten and the dairy to a certain extent too, can be, I think, harder than some of the other ones. And it is interesting. What I like about the chemicals that show up on the test. I think if people are kind of already eating quote unquote healthy, and I just put that in quotations because that means different things to different people, but you'll still have like maybe like, ooh, an M&M here or something with a food coloring in it there. Right. And there's, some of those food colorings are on the MRT. And so you can really see even that little sneaky thing, if you have a sensitivity to it, it's impacting you,
Yeah, one of my favorite things that have come up time and time again for our clients is, well, not favorite for them, but it's just is like, oh, that's so helpful on the MRT, is because it measures those chemicals. And there's a food chemical that's natural occurring, Solanine. And that's what's in nightshades. And a person won't necessarily have a sensitivity to tomatoes, potatoes, or, eggplant. Any of those, or it'll come up like mild, but then the Solanine is off the charts. It's like, okay, so and peppers is also, I'm like, salsa is not your friend.
Right.
Like that's
I'm so sorry. No Taco Tuesday for you.
No, like cut that out.
Yeah.
But once you understand that, then it becomes like, oh, I can still eat a potato, but I can't have potatoes with peppers and tomatoes and all the other because that's just going to create a burden, and my body's going to freak out.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. So why is it that you like to combine the GI map and the MRT?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, like I was saying before, if a lot of food sensitivities show up and I can see, okay, yes, this is intestinal permeability, it allows for me to give a picture to the client that these food sensitivities are actually really temporary. And taking them out is like, that's 50% of the story. So eliminating your food sensitivities might be an important temporary thing, but if you don't address the root cause, I kind of tell people, it's like, if you have a bucket with holes in it and you stop putting water in it, it doesn't mean that the bucket, it doesn't leak anymore.
I like that one. Right? I might borrow that one.
Sure. I use that. So we have to address the bucket.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We want to make sure that the bucket is doing the job that the bucket needs to do, letting through the foods and nutrients at the appropriate time. So that's one reason that I like to run them together. The other is that if I need to use supplementation, I want to understand which ones are going to be the best fit for them. People sometimes a lot of our antimicrobials will have like grapeseed extract or oil of oregano. Well, if someone is sensitive to grapefruit or sensitive to oil of oregano, I don't want to put them on that. That's just going to ignite.
I know oregano was on mine. That knocks out like so many things, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So understanding that, or if rice shows up for somebody, it's like, oh, well, rice is not a gluten containing grain. Yes, but a lot of the capsules have a rice component. So
Right.
you have to
Right.
be careful. You have to, and
Right.
if you know that, you know how to choose supplementation appropriate
Yeah.
for um, helping the client move their health
Yeah.
forward.
And
Yeah.
that, these are the little specifics that we dive into that a lot of people don't necessarily contemplate. I would never have thought about before, like
Yeah.
diving that deep. And it's like all of those things do impact your body. And part of why, I think this healing it doesn't always happen within, the 12 weeks or so of a protocol, but it has the possibility to do that much more than if you don't have all that specific information. And that's why it can
For
take so
sure.
long for people to heal a leaky
Right.
gut, right? Because of
Yep.
not having all of these little factors and
Yeah.
understanding and knowing them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is having a long view
Mm-hmm.
of what your health journey is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you come and work with like a practitioner like you or myself, it's like I would love to be able to get you to that space in 90 days, but
Mm-hmm.
you didn't get to where you are in 90 days,
Yep.
and I can't unwrap that in
Yep.
90 days.
Yep.
And sometimes not even a year.
Yeah.
Like I have had clients where they'll be doing really good, we've like
Mm-hmm.
resolved a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll be like, I feel great.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't backslide. Don't backslide.
And that's happened. That's
Mm-hmm.
happened. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, but I understand, like there's also supplement fatigue
Yeah.
and, just the mental gyrations of having to think about all the things all the time.
Yeah.
I try to get people to a stable place that they can take a break
Yeah.
and then come back and we can hit it again,
Yep.
so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So do you end up doing, like in a situation like that, you do like the 3 month, 90-day thing, take a couple months off, and then
Mm-hmm.
do a full on, kind of 90 days again, or will it
I
be a
can,
little bit more like not quite as
yeah.
intense?
Yeah, not quite as intense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really I'm sensitive to the people have a budget
Yeah,
that they have to live
absolutely.
within.
Yeah.
Also that you can't do all the things all the time.
Yeah.
So I actually work pretty slow in that first 90 days, and I'm just trying to calm your body down
Mm-hmm.
and get it less out of an inflamed and like reactive state.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe halfway through that first 90 days is when we actually start addressing what we may have found. Because
Mm-hmm.
if your immune system is really hyperactive and I come in and try to do all that, it's just going to make your body angry.
Yeah,
So it's a slow
absolutely.
process. And it really is dependent on how the client is feeling when they are ready. They're like, okay, yeah, that was good. Now I'm ready for my next.
Yeah.
What's the next phase? What does this look like?
Right. And individual reactions are so important to keep in mind, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's some clients that their body just, reacts great to a protocol right off the bat, and
Yeah.
then there's some people that it's literally one little thing just
Mm-hmm.
throws it into a crisis, and just having to be flexible with that and be, for clients too, I always try and say, like this is what we're looking at, but we have no idea how your body is going to react until
That's
we
right.
start,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
going to be starts and stops sometimes, and that's okay. That's part of the process. And it doesn't mean that your body's failing or anything like that. It's just,
Right.
we have our
Yeah.
individual needs,
Right. And your body is talking to you. So we
Yeah.
have to honor and respect the
Yep.
messages that it's saying. I have a
Mm-hmm.
client right now, poor thing. I can't even get her to drink water. Like
Mm.
water is really painful for her and
Oh
her
my,
stomach.
oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Yeah. And it can cause all kinds of problems. And,
Jeez. That's
yeah.
scary, right? When something
Yeah.
that basic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, please don't get dehydrated.
Yeah. Seriously, we don't need to add that. God, what
Right.
do you do in that situation? The only thing I would think of, like in a situation like that, because I remember in my 20s when I kind of had my first health crisis,
Mm-hmm.
I was allergic to like everything. Like I would eat greens and have a reaction,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying all the things that I could possibly do to heal. And someone randomly, I ran into this woman I barely knew. This is when I lived in San Francisco, and I ran into her on the street, and she said, "Oh yeah, I just had this like acupuncture done. That it's this allergy, elimination thing, and it's called NAAT. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I
Yeah.
do know of it.
So
Yeah.
for people that haven't heard of it, it's Nambrutapod's allergy elimination technique." And I said, well, I got to try this and see, because she said it had been working for her. And that was actually the thing that started to shift, I mean, it was slow going because it was like one one allergen at a time that you deal with, but basically you utilize kinesiology, muscle testing,
Mm-hmm.
along with, in this case, acupressure points, and then acupuncture, but chiropractors can also do it. And yeah, I mean, that wasn't the only thing that I did, but that was the turning point for me. And I was like, sometimes you got to just come in with energy medicine when nothing else
Totally.
works, right?
I mean, honestly, like I would love to sit here and, have an ego that say that I am the answer to all of your
Yeah,
digestive, but
yeah,
it's not true. Like
yeah,
I am one spoke in your wheel of wellness.
yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of when people have like a team of people, like a healthcare team
Mm-hmm.
really working, acupuncture, massage, talk
Mm,
therapy, all of those pieces are
yep.
really important in moving your health forward.
Yeah. Oh, give it to me. I want all
Yoga,
those people.
like that,
I'm like, I want
right?
all those people on my team.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a great overview of both of those tests. So thank you for sharing that and how
Yeah.
they work together. I know that you use some other testing in your practice, and that
Hmm.
sometimes, even with stool analysis, that there are situations where some of the other tests are a better fit than the GI map. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and what
Yeah,
other tests
sure.
there are?
Yeah, so the other one, I work with a team of doctors. Have a referral with some naturopaths, and they tend to like the Genova GIFX
Hmm.
stool analysis, and that's a good test. That uses similar technology as the GI map,
Okay.
and there are times that is a little bit more of an appropriate test if we need to look at a little bit deeper understanding of like on the GI map where we can only see the steatocrit number
Hmm.
for how well the body is digesting fat.
Hmm.
In the Genova, you can actually see the fecal fat breakdown. So you can see cholesterol, you can see triglycerides, you can see
Ooh.
a little bit deeper dive. And that, so if someone's coming in like they've had their gallbladder removed, or
Mm.
you get a sense that there's like a biliary bile, gallbladder component
Hmm.
here, then potentially that would be a time that you'd say that test might be give me a little bit more information to work
Yeah.
with in that lane.
Yeah.
It,
That makes
it does
sense.
give a lot of the same, like you do see a lot of the beneficial bacteria break out the same. The GI map does a better job of showing you the commensal, and
Mm.
the Genova doesn't as much, in my opinion.
Hmm.
But the one thing about the Genova that I also like is you can see the short chain fatty acids, like the
Oh.
specific ones. And butyrate is an anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acid. So if I can see that that's low or too high, like it gives us a sense of other aspects of the digestive health that we wouldn't get with the GI map.
Right.
So
Ooh, I like
sometimes,
that.
yeah, sometimes you want to pick that
Yeah.
particular one. GI map, it includes the H. pylori. That's part of the cost for Genova. That's an add-on
Gotcha.
test. So if I'm more suspicious H. pylori, I'm probably going to go, GI map
Hmm.
versus the other one. So it really depends. I'm a huge fan of what is the client's body saying,
Hmm.
and what are we suspicious that the underlying root cause is, and what test is really going to give us the most information around that specific situation.
Hmm.
But those are two reasons that I would kind of maybe lean over into that other test versus the GI map.
Yeah. I mean, it's always exciting when you get more information. I mean,
Yeah,
it's always, it may not always be good, but it's helpful to be able to see
yeah,
those things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the Genova test does have more like sexy graphics and charts
Ooh,
and stuff.
I do
So
like
it is
that.
kind of
That's why I
like
love the
visually.
Dutch. I'm
Yes.
always,
Oh, I
it's so
love
much fun, right? You're like, oh my
right.
God, all the things, all the little dials.
Right.
You had mentioned earlier about using the Oats test for yeast and then mold also. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. Okay, can you tell
Yeah.
us a little
So
bit about that?
you can see yeast and mold on the organic acid. Organic acid tests out. It's a urinary test, so it's like the metabolite of whatever's left over in the body.
Hmm.
And so, what's beautiful about that test specifically is you don't have to stop any medication or supplementation. There are a few
Well,
that you can't eat because it's an end product. We're testing the end
right,
product,
right, right.
right? So we can also see like how well your body's detoxifying, how well your body is using your ketones. We get a view of your Krebs cycle, like all of these like little intricacies based on these end products, which is really great. But the mold, the yeast and the mold, they have markers specifically around that, like aspergillus, we can see that as a mold,
That's great.
and then we can see that candida, like a yeast. It comes out across as like arabinose, I think is the
Gotcha.
how it's quantified.
Right. Yeah, I feel like, the mold thing is such a big issue these days, has come up so big for so many people. I did a project last year called Hidden, and it was all women dealing with chronic illnesses, and most of them multiple chronic illnesses, right?
Yeah.
And I learned about POTS at that time,
Mm-hmm.
POTS, which I never
I've heard of
know.
it. Yeah.
I never know what exactly it stands for. I kind of see it in my head, but I can't say it. But it's basically a connective tissue disorder. And, there's issues around electrolyte balance with it. Like people end up sort of in the ER a lot, just, needing IV bags and things like that. And one of the women had it, and I mean, she's late 20s, and she's, it amazes me. She's been dealing with this for years and years and years, and going to all the, specialists in the research hospitals and everything. And I had learned about mold being, connected to POTS, I think I forget, one of the functional medicine doctors that I follow. So I sent her a little message, and she just recently saw an integrative doctor and found out she has a really bad mold problem, and it's just so many of these chronic illnesses. It's like the pathogens and the mold and the Lyme, and, it's such a big root cause.
Yeah, you can test specifically for mold, and that's a different test if you're suspicious, like, and it's called a mycotoxin test. And that will give you a really good picture of, and again, it's an end product, so it's a urine test. Pee in a cup, send it off, and it goes. But I've been surprised at how many times people come back with mold in the body. Like it actually is so much, and because I live in the Pacific Northwest,
so it's rainy,
damp and mossy and
totally. I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I had a client a while back, and her son was having some health issues, and I said, I think we should test for mold, and she's like, no, we live in a pretty brand new house, like within the last 5-year construction, blah, blah. And I said, let's just do it. Like, what do you got to lose? I mean, you've tried everything else. Came back, the boy had just
crazy
tons of mold. And I said, you know what, you can take care of the mold, but you have to find the source of the mold. Right?
Because it's going to keep feeding it.
Right. And I said, get your air tested. Oh no, our house is pretty new. And I said, just test your house. She messaged me, and she's like, they came in and did a test, and there was mold being pumped out through their air register system. They had to come in and do everything. So they cleaned it. They had the mold specialist come in and clean everything out. They didn't find any mold in the house, but just in the venting system.
In the venting, yeah.
And then she messaged me later and said, she goes, I thought I felt good. I didn't know how it was affecting me.
Yeah, of course.
And then talk about a game changer, right? That's pretty.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me because I think about this. I mean, mold has obviously been around for all of humanity, right? And is it just because our systems are so overloaded because of everything else that it impacts us this much now? Or is it just something that's always been an issue? I'm just, I'm kind of curious about that. But
I think I feel like we're more compromised just because the quality of even if we're trying to eat organic and doing all the things to take care of our house, like our food quality is, from 50 years ago is 50% less nutritious. And that's the organic stuff. And it's like, that sucks.
Yeah, not to mention the chemicals and everything.
Right.
The plastics.
We're just exposed to so much more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for all of your great information and your explanations. I think we're just, so perfect for people to really understand what these tests, like the purpose of doing these tests, and and really just our digestion is at the root of our health, and so
Yes.
if you have hormonal imbalances, this is why I talk about always having, focus on digestion. Like we got to get that
Mm-hmm.
in gear. And, to me, hormone stuff, it's like gut, liver, stress, and really getting that gut, because your liver is going to be stressed out if your gut's not
Mm-hmm.
doing well. Your adrenals
Right.
are going to be stressed out. There's stress in your body that's happening when your gut's not working well, and the pathogens there.
Right.
So yeah, getting that cleared up, it can help a lot with everything else without
Yeah.
even focusing on those things yet.
Yeah.
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 It's I think getting the testing, there's a cost associated with it, and
Mm-hmm.
work with a practitioner that can help you sequence those things so that
Mm-hmm.
you can get, maximum yield. But
Mm-hmm.
when you have that information, for a lot of people, it is just like the one thing that's been missing.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it's really ultimately worth that investment, I mean,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're just going to spend years and years, continuing to try and find the way, and
Right.
sadly not get there usually,
All right.
so yeah.
Dr. Google doesn't always provide you all the
No, especially these days, too many
right.
things, too many
Right.
things.
All the things, too many things. Yes, I agree.
Well, everybody can check you out at your website, as I
Yep.
mentioned earlier, and that'll be in the notes. Do you have any, are you on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Redeeming Nutrition. And on my
Nice.
website, I do have a free gift always at the top right-hand corner. So who are interested, and I think this month it's an immune system builder.
Oh,
So
cool. That
yeah,
is definitely what people need right now. That is for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show today and
yeah.
tell us
Thank you
about
for
all
having
this
me.
stuff. So,
For
all right,
sure. It's
guys,
fun.
I will see you next time.